What's up, everybody? Brandon 4G63. As promised, we're going to show you how to put these pistons together. We're going to start by putting the wrist pins and the connecting rods together. I'm going to show you the steps, the do's, the don'ts, and the way I like to do it versus the way they say to do it. Not saying it's right, it's just how I've learned to do it. So, first things first. Each piston is going to be labeled with a 1, 2, 3, 4 so you know which cylinder it is. So if you look real closely here, this is cylinder 3. And I don't know if you could tell, but right there in the center it says 3. Then if you also look, there's a dot. That dot goes to the front of the motor, so you know which way your piston is, which cylinder is supposed to be. And the same can be said with the rods. So each one of these rods are weighted and balanced, but we went a step further and had them professionally balanced after the machining process and everything, so the motor's going to spin as free as possible. We got our girdle on over here, as you can see. Nice, clean, rotating assembly. Everything's just looks great, torque to spec. So now we're going to move on to getting our pistons done. So we'll go with piston number 2. These are our spiral rings, or spiral locks, whatever you want to call them. So we'll go through and we'll open these up. Get these laid out. We will grab our number 2 piston and our number 2 rod, or rod and piston. Sorry, I got that backwards. So, there's a couple of things you want to do. First thing you want to do is be careful that you don't scar the inside of your journals. You want to go in here and you want to feel with your finger. I mean, you can even close your eyes and just feel in there and see if you feel any notches, imperfections, and make sure it's super clean. You don't want nothing in here, but that's, you know, common sense, but common sense ain't so common. Next thing is make sure you have a couple rags handy, because this does get a little dirty. So what we're going to do is set a couple of those off to the side. We're using Manly connecting rod lubricant, and it seems to have like a graphite base to it, which I think is probably what it is. If you look here at the wrist pin, every wrist pin is numbered along with the piston. That way you know exactly which one it goes in, where it goes. So, as always, you know, inspect everything, check everything, look for any gouges on the edge of your pistons, and for crying out loud, please be careful. Don't ever nick the side of your piston, because then you're just costing yourself a bunch of money. So, and I'm going to get into that in a minute of what they say to do and what I actually do. It's because I'm brave or dumb, whatever you want to call it. So, next thing is, take your wrist pin out, inspect your wrist pin. Do the same thing, feel all the way across it, look for any lesions or anything like that that might, you know, end up chewing it up. Seems really nice. They, you know, Manly and Wiseco have great quality control. Same thing with the inside here, you know, feel it, make sure there's nothing funny, no funny edges. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our lube. I'm going to lube the inside of this. Get down in there, and you know, don't worry about how much you put in. Just make sure you can put too much, but I mean, you really got to be getting carried away, and make sure it's fully coated. So now the inside of that's coated. Same with the inside of the piston, where the wrist pin's going to go in and fit. We want to make sure that whole area in there is nice and lubricated. Try your best to keep it off of the piston. You know, try and keep the piston good and clean. I've learned if I use one finger, one hand, clean hand to hold the piston, and one dirty finger, the stinky finger, if you will, you have a better chance of keeping your piston a little bit clean, as I just made a mess anyways. So let's see. Now when you push that wrist pin through, it's going to squeeze a bunch on the outside, because these are such precision parts that you know, there's not really much room for lubricant down in there. So just clean that up a hair. Alright, next you're going to take your wrist pin and lube it up. Alright. Go through My daughter's over here watching in the corner asking, what's that? What's this? This is the wristband which holds the piston, honey.
Oh.
And if you sit there and watch, I'll show you. So, like I said, this is a little different than, it's got graphite or something in it. It's a little different than your normal assembly lube. And there's a reason, I'm sure I could have got away with using an assembly lube on here, just like the regular stuff that I did the bearings with. But if Manly sends it with, I might as well use it because that's what they use. So, try and keep my hand clean here. Get a dirty hand and a clean hand. You definitely go through some rags doing this. All right. So, I'm going to start by setting this upright. I'm going to grab the edge of it. I'm going to just start to get that through. And it's tough to get them started because they're the precision. But there we go. All right. Now, always pay attention to which way it's shaped and which way it's going. Some pistons, not these ones, but some will have an offset wrist pin for, you know, depending on if it's V8 or if it's a slant 6 or whatever the case might be. These are symmetrical, I believe they say. So next thing is get that wrist pin down in there through the connecting rod. Give it a little wiggle. Make sure nothing feels funny and make sure nothing's hanging up. And everything looks real good there. Kind of wiggle it through. I like it. Okay. So you'll have a bunch on the outside here. We're going to try and clean that up. And usually what I'll do is I'll wipe a little bit on the other side. Then we clean it up afterwards. So helps us get that spiral ring in a little better. So next thing we want to do when we get them in, we're going to hold that wrist pin and we're going to move the rod. Make sure that rod's free floating and you don't feel nothing funny. Then do the same here. Make sure the rod and the piston are moving all as a unit. Alright, now comes to the controversial part of it. Putting the spiral ring in. So they say to use a wood dowel or a piece of plastic or a non-metallic item. Problem with that is shit like that breaks and could definitely cause you to slip and smack the edge of the piston. And granted, if you're not using if you're using a non-metallic something or another, you're probably not going to scar the piston, but it's going to fight you a little bit more. So what I've learned to do is I have these here, these little tools here. Yes, they are metal, and I trust myself enough to not catch the piston. So I'm going to take this spiral lock here, and if you notice, there's a little groove right here. That groove is made to get a tool like this pick tool, down in there to pry out the ring if you ever need to pull it out. Hopefully we won't have to do that. Now, the biggest thing is you really don't want to touch the edge of this piston here. You don't want this section here to get scarred. So what I tend to do is you find this little gouge. There's a little ring or a little indention inside here that snap ring fits into. Spiral ring. And then you put one end in there, like so. And I've noticed if you put it in at this angle, just slightly past the removal tab, you can kind of spin them down in there. So very gingerly. Oop, see, I slipped, but I slipped away from the piston wall, so oop, and there goes the ring. This is a tedious project here, guys, so let me clean that up a little bit more on the inside there so I can see what I'm working with. But make sure we're actually in the groove. And the tip of these have just enough of a V to kind of get a grab on it. Just like so. So you see how the ring's almost in? So the ring's kind of pushed in, and I didn't have to worry about scarring the edge of it. Scarring the outer section here isn't really a big deal. I mean, you don't want to gouge the inside for sure, but by doing it this way, where you just kind of spin it in like so, and then watch, I'll grab it, and we're gonna finish pushing it in here, and you'll hear it snap. Ready? Boom. So once it snaps in, it's always a wise idea to kind of go through. I have a Allen key. I'll just kind of go through and I'll tap it just to make sure that it seats inside there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to push that rod, or the wrist pin, all the way back down, nice and snug to the other side. Clean it up a little bit and repeat. So we already got one done, and then after this process is all finished, you get your rings in, you go through, make sure everything looks good, make sure there's no scarring, make sure there's nothing like that that will cause you an issue when you build your motor. So I hope that was helpful for you guys. Please follow, like, subscribe, and share for G63 NASCAR. We look forward to seeing you on the streets.